Welcome back. I'm Anthony Nicoli, and today we'll be reading the second part of Chapter 1 in Joseph Campbell's Primitive Mythology, part of the Masks of God series. It's part of the first section of Chapter 1. Chapter 1 is called The Enigma of the Inherited Image, and the first section is the innate releasing mechanism. And last time we read the first half of that section, and I will start up. As N. Tinbergen has so well advised in his introductory lectures on the study of instinct, such generalization, based on too narrow a foundation, tends to give rise to unnecessary controversy. Special emphasis should be placed on the importance of a complete inventory of the behavior patterns of a species before conclusions are announced. For the problem of the relationship of innate to conditioned behavior is far from resolved even for animal species very much less complicated than our own. Nor can general laws be announced for the animal world that will necessarily be valid from one species to the next. The young of the cuckoo, hatched from an egg laid in the nest of another species, and without previous experience of its own kind, when it is fledged, flocks only with cuckoos, all of which likewise have been raised in the nests of other birds, and have never been taught to recognize their own kind. But on the other hand, a duckling will attach itself to a parent, to the first creature that greets its eye, but it leaves the egg. For example, a mother hen. The case of the cuckoo, like that of the chicks responding to the hawk, or of the turtles rushing for the sea, illustrates the first point to be emphasized in our brief consideration of this problem of the physiology of the inherited image, namely, the now well demonstrated fact already noted that in the central nervous system of all animals there exist innate structures that are somehow counterparts of the proper environment of the species. The Gestalt psychologist Wolfgang Kohler has termed these structures in the central nervous system isomorphs. The animal, directed by innate endowment, comes to terms with its natural environment not as a consequence of any long, slow learning through experience, through trial and error, but immediately, and with the certainty of recognition. The case of the duckling, on the other hand, illustrates a second point that must be noted if we are to appreciate the relevance of these studies to our own problem of the mythological archetypes. Namely, the fact that although in many instances the sign stimuli that release animal responses are immutable and correspond to the inner readiness of the creature as precisely as key to lock, in fact have been termed key tumbler structures, there are also systems of response that are established by individual experience. In such, the structure of the IRM, innate releasing mechanism, is described as open. It is susceptible to impression or imprint, pragung. Moreover, as in the instance of the duckling, where these open structures exist, the first imprint is definitive, requires sometimes less than a minute for its completion, and is irreversible. Furthermore, according to Professor Tinbergen, who has given particular attention to the problem of animal learning, not only do differing species have different dispositions to learn, but such innate dispositions come to maturity only in certain critical periods of the animal's growth. The Eskimo dogs of East Greenland, he writes, for example, live in packs of 5 to 10 individuals. The members of a pack defend their group territory against all other dogs. All dogs of an Eskimo settlement have an exact and detailed knowledge of the topography of the territories of other packs. They know where attacks from other packs must be feared. Immature dogs, however, do not defend the territory. Moreover, They often roam through the whole settlement, very often trespassing into other territories, where they are promptly chased. In spite of these frequent attacks, during which they may be severely treated, they do not learn the territory's topography, and for the observer their stupidity in this respect is amazing. While the young dogs are growing sexually mature, however, they begin to learn the other territories, and within a week their trespassing adventures are over. In 2 male dogs, the first copulation, the first defensive territory, and the first avoidance of strange territory all occurred within 1 week. After the work of Sigmund Freud and his school on the stages of the maturation of the human infant and the force of the imprints acquired in those stages on the responses of the individual throughout life, it will hardly be necessary to argue the relevance of the concepts of inner readiness and imprint to the sphere of human learning. Much of what the infant has to learn, furthermore, resembles remarkably the sociology of the Eskimo Huskies, since it has to do largely with the various aspects of group affiliation. There is, however, in the human sphere a factor that makes all study of instinct and innate structures extremely difficult. For whereas even the animals most helpless at birth mature very quickly, the human infant is utterly helpless during the first dozen years of its existence, and during this period of the maturation of its character, is completely subject to the pressures and imprints of its local society. In fact, as Adolf Portman of Basel has so well and frequently pointed out, precisely those 3 endowments of erect posture, speech, and thought, which elevate man above the animal sphere, develop only after birth, and consequently, in the structure of every individual, represent an indissoluble amalgam of innate biological and impressed traditional factors. We cannot think of one without the other. And so, in the name of science, let us not try to do so. It is possible, of course, to identify even in man a certain number of innate key tumbler responses, that of the infant to the nipple, for example. It is obvious also that in man, just as in the lower animals, there are certain central excitatory mechanisms, CEMs, which receive stimulation both from within and from without, and move the individual to appetitive behavior, sometimes even against his better judgment. A manifest example is the response of the sexual appetite to the stimulus of certain hormones, for example, testosterone, propionate, and estrogen, and the reaction then even of the innocent individual to the sign stimuli so well known to the whole species. These phenomena, I should say, require no laboratory tests to warrant our regard. But it must not be forgotten that the entire instinct structure of man is much more open to learning and conditioning than that of animals, so that when evaluating human behavior, we have always a very much stronger factor of individual experience to consider than when measuring the central excitatory mechanisms, CEMs, and the innate releasing mechanisms, IRMs, of insect, fish, bird, or even ape. This important fact may help to clarify the main lines of the problem announced in Bastian's contrast of elementary with ethnic ideas. The elementary or innate ideas we must interpret, I believe, as a reference in 19th century terms to what now would be called the innate neurological structures, CEMs and IRMs, of the biological species Homo sapiens. Those inherited structures in the central nervous system that constitute the elementary foundations of all human experience and reaction. The ethnic ideas, on the other hand, refer to the historically conditioned context of sign stimuli through which the activities of man in any given society are released. But since there is no such thing as man qua man, abstracted from all sociological conditioning, there are very few examples of unimprinted sign stimuli on the level of human ethology. And this is what has made it possible for students of the phenomenology of our species to write sometimes as though there were in the human race no inherited structuring system whatsoever. It is now, however, a thoroughly proven fact that the human mind is by no means the mere tabula rasa of 17th century epistemology. Indeed, quite the contrary. It is an aggregate of a great many predicating structures, each with its own readiness of response. The mere fact that they are more open than their animal homologues to individual experience must not be allowed to distract us from the more basic fact of their existence, or of their force in establishing and maintaining those basic similarities in human culture the world over, which are vastly more massive than the variations. But equally, and on the other hand, we must not be quick to suppose that because an extensive or even universal distribution has been established for any given sign stimulus, this then may be regarded as innate and not impressed. So we'll stop there today, at the beginning of section 2 of chapter 1, and we'll pick up there next time with section 2 called the supernormal sign stimulus. Thank you for joining me, and enjoy your day.